Welcome to another coffee tasting. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor, and today we are revisiting the Guatemala Antigua blend. So last week we learned a little bit about the Brazil coffee, and so today we're going to learn a little bit about the Guatemala blend. So for those of you joining me for the first time, welcome, and for everyone who are returning, welcome back. It is an honor. If you haven't had a chance to hit that like and subscribe button, do hit that like and subscribe button down below. That allows me to create more and better content for you guys on this channel, and I greatly appreciate it. And then for those of you who are here for the first time, we like to brew our coffee 3 different ways. That way we get to explore the different flavor notes that each different brewing method has to offer. Even though we're drinking the same cup of coffee, we're going to get different notes depending on the brew method that we choose to brew our coffee. With the paper filter, we're going to get less sediments and less oils, but we're still going to get some more of those oils in this in the paper filter. But in the Chemex is going to have a triple paper filter, so we're going to get even more of those oils being absorbed into the paper filter, allowing us to get a much more cleaner and smoother cup of coffee. And so each of these methods have different grinds, proportions, and different amounts of water. And so with the pour over, we're getting one of the finer grinds, and then the Chemex is going to be on a slightly coarser grind than the pour over, and then the French press is going to have the coarsest of the grinds. And then each of them is going to serve a different amount of coffee as well. So with the French press, we're getting pretty much 2 servings. The Chemex, we're getting about a serving and a half, and then the pour over is just a single cup of coffee. So making sure that you get your grind and proportion right is very important because that can impact how long your brew takes. And if your brew takes longer than it should or it's faster than it should, it's going to impact the flavor of your coffee. So you might get a very delicious bag of coffee, but if it's brewed improperly, it's going to impact your opinion of that coffee. So you might have a negative opinion of that coffee, but it might have been because of the brew process. So making sure that we brew our coffee properly is very important so that we can get those flavors that are intended not just from the coffee but from the growers. The people who grow our coffee, they grow the coffee and process the coffee with intentions of bringing out certain flavors. So making sure that we brew our coffee properly is very important when it comes to paying respects to the people who grow the coffee and making sure that you get a good, delicious tasting cup of coffee as well. Excellent. So this is one of my favorite core coffees. I tend to lean more towards the Latin American coffees because we do get those milk chocolate notes. And this one's gonna have cocoa notes with a subtle spice notes. So this one's going to be very, very smooth. I really like this one just because those chocolate notes do come out more in this one than you would in other coffees. And the reason why that is because of that subtle spice. So in some other coffees, we're getting like bright citrus flavors, maybe a tangerine sweetness. And with those coffees, we really get those intense, bright notes. But with this one, because it's a subtle spice, that spice is going to be those bright notes we get, and they're not as intense as like a citrus note. And so it's not going to be as predominant. So we're going to go ahead and taste the pour over first. So with the pour over, we're going to get a lot more of those spicy roasty notes, and then it's going to finish off with those cocoa. So when I smell the coffee, the first thing that I'm getting is definitely those roasty notes, and then we get a little bit of those bitter cocoas from the aroma. Oh yeah, so immediately right off the bat, we're getting those intense roasty flavors on the sides of our tongue, but it doesn't linger on very long. And then as it washes away, we're starting to get those milk chocolate notes. But with those bright roasty flavors, they do leave a little bit of a dry palate on your tongue. So it has that dry mouth feeling. And that's going to be because of those bright roasty notes and those oils from those flavors that we're getting. So this is good. This has got a nice like warm feeling to it in terms of flavor, like you're sitting in front of a campfire or maybe like a um, in front of your fire in your home, giving you that feeling of warmth. And so that's what those roasty notes mimic. It's like a feeling of warmth and sitting in front of a fire. So even when this coffee gets cold, it's gonna still have that warm feeling just from those notes. So now we're gonna try the Chemex. With the Chemex, we are getting less of those oils and a lot less of those sediments. So it's going to be a much cleaner cup of coffee. It's going to be much smoother and much cleaner as well. So those roasty notes aren't going to be as intense and those allowing for those bitter notes to come forward. But those bitter notes are still going to be very subtle. So we're going to get very subtle bitter chocolate notes with a little bit of roasty flavor. So as I smell this coffee, we're definitely getting a lot more of those chocolate notes coming forward. The roasty flavors isn't definitely driving the cup of coffee in terms of the aroma. So we're definitely getting a lot more of those chocolate flavors. That is really good. We're still getting some more of those roasty notes, but it's not as predominant as it is in the pour over. It's kind of like complementing the chocolate notes, so we're getting those primarily cocoa notes with a little bit of subtle roasty notes on the side. Really, really good. I actually like that a lot. That makes for a really, really good Chemex, you guys. And so now we're going to try the French press. With the French press, this is a full immersed cup of coffee, and then it has a coarser grind, so the water is going to sit in the grinds are going to sit in the water for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then you're going to plunge it, and then because it has a longer time with the water, it's going to brew longer and let more flavors out. But then also at the same time, we have a coarser grind. So with that coarser grind, we have less surface area in the grinds to release those flavors. So it's kind of like a balance in flavors. So it's not necessarily going to have more caffeine. We're just going to have a lot more intense flavors. And then we do have two servings here. So if you do drink a full French press, the reason why you're getting more caffeine is because you're drinking two servings of coffee. Ooh, that's really good. So with the French press, we're primarily getting those chocolate notes. Those roasty notes are almost nearly non-existent because those bitter notes are so forward and we're primarily getting those chocolate notes. There is a subtle hint of like a roasty nut flavor in there, but we're primarily getting those chocolate notes. And that's really, really good. That's what I look for in a coffee is primarily chocolate notes with a little bit of like those like caramel or like hazelnut flavors. And because the bitter chocolates come forward so much, it dies down the roastiness and actually like exposes some of those nutty flavors that those roasty notes have when those roasty notes, excuse me, aren't so intense. Whew, really, really good. So my favorite brew process for the Guatemala Antigua, you guys, is the French press, just because we're getting those intense bitter chocolate notes. Those roasty notes are disguised by the bitter chocolate notes, giving it more of a nutty flavor, which is what I like. With the Chemex is still really, really good because we're getting a lot more of those chocolate notes, but with that roasty flavor to complement. But if you do really like that campfire roasty flavor, the pour over would be a good option, especially if you're sitting down in front of a campfire on a cold night and you want to get that little extra warmth feeling. Just those flavor of those roasty notes is going to trick your mind into thinking you're a little bit warmer. Plus, you're sipping on a hot cup of coffee. So that is the flavor notes of our coffee. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Guatemala Antigua itself. So Guatemala started cultivating coffee around the 1850s. And if you guys joined me last week, we learned a little bit about Brazil coffee and how it was one of the main producers of coffee up until the 1850s. And in the 1850s is when other parts of the world started to cultivate coffee, where Brazil started to see a decline in exports just because of the fact that people are starting to grow coffee in other parts of the world. So Guatemala got its coffee around the 1850s, and there are multiple regions of Guatemala with the Guatemala Antigua, Tenango, Tenango, and the Coban regions, among many others. And each of these regions have microclimates that are little areas of climate that are contained by the mountainous regions of this area. So with Guatemala Antigua, this is one of the more well-known coffee regions of Guatemala. And the reason why it's one of the more well-known regions of well-known coffee regions is because it's in the middle and in between three different volcanoes. And so with this, we have uh, lush forests and nitrogen-rich soil from the volcanic soil. Um, and this microclimate provides the perfect atmosphere for coffee to grow and able to allow the farmers to create this delicious, flavorful cup of coffee. And so without this volcanic rich soil and the lush flora around the area to provide those nutrients for the coffee to grow, we wouldn't be able to create a coffee with the intense flavor notes that this particular cup have. So that's what's important about this region is the fact that there's this region that is pretty much tailored to create coffee, but it's all created by nature. Nature just happened to create this little region of the world that is perfect for us to create a superb, flavorful cup of coffee. And so, with this cup of coffee, also, another really important part about the Guatemala coffee and other Latin American coffees is the importance of what it means economically. So, with a lot of Latin American farmers, they switched over to coffee because it was a much more sustainable crop to grow. With other crops, it was just too expensive. You have the demand of sugar declining, and other crops just required so much maintenance that it just wasn't worth it, and uh, you couldn't make the living that you needed to sustain a decent livelihood. So with coffee starting to see a increase in demand in the early 1900s, you start to see areas of Latin America that are starting to see like major financial growth. Guatemala, Brazil, and also other parts of the region like Colombia. You have tons of regions of Latin America that are benefiting from the economic growth and exports of coffee and switching from different crops to coffee crops because coffee is more sustainable, easier to grow, and then also with the pulp and the cherries being recycled back into the ground, it's allowing us to create more farmable land. So that's what makes coffee so important, and that's the story about the Guatemala Antigua. So next time you guys sip on your Guatemala Antigua, I hope you guys think about the story and how much it impacts the farmers in Latin America and how you're helping them create a sustainable livelihood and allowing them to make their money year round and not have to worry about their dollar at the end of the day. So thank you everyone for joining me in today's live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope your coffee was nice, warm, and delicious like mine was. Have a great day.